Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And Giga Maggie.
Howdy, welcome to Mays MasterCast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Interim Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs, here with your intrepid host, Ben Wiggins.
Intrepid. I am feeling very intrepid today, Shannon. How you doing?
I'm good. Someone called me intrepid this week, and I was like, oh, that is a huge compliment. I mean, in this context, it was especially a huge compliment. And then I was like, I need to call Ben intrepid because he is too.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. Did you do any intrepid wakeboarding this weekend?
I didn't. It starts this weekend.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, happy Easter to you.
Thank you.
And to your loved ones.
Yeah, we did a lot of rock climbing this weekend. I taught in Houston on Friday. So it was good. I got to see family there and everything. It was a nice weekend. How about yours?
It was nice. Yeah, it was very nice. We had we went to actually saw you this weekend, which was nice. We have not connected in person in quite a while.
A long time.
So that was good. And I walked with Brielle around the parking lot. She went to Aqua-Tots this past Saturday. I feel like now instead of recapping my weekend, I always recap Brielle's weekend.
Yep.
Which I guess that's just a dad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But we took her to Jumping World and she went to Aqua-Tots on Saturday. And so she got to do Bouncy, which is one of her favorites right now.
I love Jumping World. We take our nieces and nephews every chance we can just as an excuse to go play at Jumping World. I'm like, oh, y'all want to go to Jumping World so we don't look like the creepy adults there by ourselves?
Brielle made a ton of new friends at Jumping World. She always just walks around to everybody. Hi, like, waves her hand. And it's especially cute at Aqua-Tots because she's got like her flamingo bathing suit on and just kind of wandering around and saying hi to everyone.
That's so sweet. Very good. Yeah. Well, today on the show, we have Britt Harris. Britt is beloved by all of the titans of investing at Mays Business School. So we are so excited to have him on the show so that those former students especially can connect with Britt, even if it's just virtually. Britt is currently the president, CEO, and CIO of the University of Texas and Texas A&M Investment Company. He also advises the New York and Dallas Federal Reserves and has managed 7 funds worth more than $500 billion. He was formerly on the U.S. President's Board of Systemic Risk and managed U.S. private, public, endowment, and hedge funds. Prior to his current role, he was the CIO for the Teacher Retirement Services of Texas, and prior to that, served as CEO of Bridgewater Associates. He has been consistently named one of the top 5 asset investors in the world, and in 2013, he was honored with a Lifetime Achievement for Distinguished Service to the Financial Industry. He is a distinguished A&M Business School alumni and currently serves as the director for the Titans of Investing program at Mays Business School, which is an awesome high-impact experience for students. In addition, he is a frequent speaker on various spiritual matters and serves on a variety of public and private boards. Britt has been married for 40 years with 4 children and 3 grandchildren. He is a 4th generation Aggie. Please welcome Britt to the show.
Looking forward to it. This is a great discussion. We welcome Britt Harris to the show. How's it going?
Going terrific. So glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. Did you have a nice weekend?
Well, this is Easter weekend, so I had a fantastic week, really important weekend to me. Saw the family, went to church. It was amazing.
Yeah, we were fortunate to do the same. I'm glad you had a good time. What is your favorite superpower?
I always liked Thor.
Oh,
big hammer. You got to bring the hammer.
Right.
Eventually, you need the silver sword, but every once in a while you need the pen, but every once in a while you need the hammer.
True statement. You were talking about something fascinating before we jumped on about the kind of the 4 stages of learning, 4 stages of knowledge. Can you briefly share a little Cliff's Notes on that?
Sure. So you'd ask a good question, and it was kind of complicated. And I said, look, there are 4 levels of knowledge. The first level is arrogance. I didn't mean that about you specifically, but But, when we're in college and if we're doing well, I guess we have some right to feel arrogant, like everything is going well and we're making great grades and we think we know everything because an A means you know everything, right? Then when you graduate, you find out that test taking is really not a skill that's used in the outer world.
Right.
And suddenly you go into the real game and you go from arrogance to despair because all of a sudden, you're back in kindergarten and everybody that works there is much more experienced than you are. And you don't find out you don't know much at all. And people will tell you that, especially if you're in a really competitive business. I know for sure I was told a couple of times, you're an idiot. So thank you very much. That's exactly how I feel right now. When that happens, though, it's always good to look at somebody who's just a couple of years ahead of you because, they're just a few years ahead and it looks like they've got it all together. And, you go to them and you say, how did you feel when you were just out maybe 3, 6 months, even a year?
Right.
And they say, well, terrible. I felt like I didn't know anything. And yet just 2 years later, it's amazing the progress you can make. And all of a sudden they're polished professionals and they know a lot. They've moved from despair to complexity. They know a lot of things about a lot of things. But complexity is not the highest level of knowledge. Simplicity is the highest level of knowledge. There may be 1,000 things that you can know, but unless you know the 5 or 10 things that are really the most important, then your complexity will prevent your productivity over time. So it's really, you have to rise from just knowing things to wisdom. And there's a huge difference.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me that in those 4 stages, you also have 2 sets of opposites. You have your arrogance at the beginning mirrored by despair, and then graduating to complexity mirrored by simplicity. I like that system.
I think what it really does is helps particularly young people understand what's happening, particularly in the early years. And then when you get older and you know a lot of things, you realize, well, I don't, which one of these is most important? And if you can figure that out, you're going to be vastly more productive and more successful.
I love it.
What about your time at A&M?
Oh man, my time at A&M was fantastic. As I said, I'm lucky enough to be a 4th generation Aggie. So my family were Aggies all the way through. I remember my grandfather would say, son, don't never ask somebody where they went to school. I said, well, why not? He said, well, you don't want to embarrass them. If they're Aggies, they'll tell you. So I try to follow that rule. And so I came to A&M, finance major, spent my whole time essentially in intramural sports.
What happened after you graduated?
Well, I found out that just during school, you realize that you don't have straight A's. You don't have to actually be good at everything. It didn't really matter what I knew about geology at that point. If we had people to know about that, it didn't matter. What I knew about how well I played ping pong, although I was very good at ping pong. I just had to be good at really one thing. And it's sort of a message I'd like to get out there. Like, you can be good at a lot of things, but the important thing is that you're really very good at one thing. And school is fantastic. Obviously, I teach there and I love it. But school is where you practice. And the practice is the success metric on the practice is you take a test, lasts for, it's 100 questions, true and false, multiple choice, maybe rarely written, and you get an A or, whatever you get. There's nothing like that in people. That's not the way the world works when you get out. You never take a test again, for the most part. And so when I talk to my students, I say, look, they're amazing. I mean, these are top students and wonderful young people. I said, if all you have is test taking skills, your best day is graduation day because you're going down after that. So for me, number one is I went to work for Texas Utilities.
Yeah.
And I'd been accepted to grad school, but I was in love with the girl I told you I saw in the choir,
Right.
and I wanted to get married. And so Texas Utilities offered me a job. I accepted it. And I learned something that is just rung true all through the years. Your first boss matters. Your first boss really, really matters because that boss brands you in terms of what you come to think is normal.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it. I didn't know it at the time, but I had a boss named Earl Nye. And if you're nagging, you should know Earl Nye is one of the most famous Aggies there is. And he eventually became chair of the Regents, and I think twice, and has done so much for A&M and for our state. And he was a CEO, and then there was a man named Gerald Gibbs, who was a retired lieutenant colonel, and he was kind of the chief of staff.
Right.
He was from A&M, and then I was the guy who carried the bags, for 4 years, and so I got to see really professional people who were excellent at their job, who were fully engaged in what they were doing, who cared about people, who cared about their communities, who cared about the state and the world, and were also very good at running the business for shareholders and customers. And so I feel like I just was blessed by the way these men branded me. And both of them obviously became distinguished alumni of the school. And then I became a distinguished alumni of the school. So three of us were there together. And, when I made it, they were kind of like, well, certainly they have softened the requirements. I said, well, no, you can blame yourself for this.
Yeah, this is all your fault. So let's jump to some discussion of investments. Just free associate, whatever you want to talk about.
All right. So I'm currently the CIO for UTIMCO, which is the University of Texas and Texas A&M investment management company. We manage about $60 billion, and we do it for A&M and UT for a thing called the PUF, Permanent University Fund, where we have 2.1 million acres of West Texas land that normally throws off about $1 billion a year, and then that gets attributed to the schools. In addition to that, we also serve the medical systems, which are MD Anderson, Southwest Medical, and so on.
Okay.
So we have this incredible, and so we're, of all the endowments in the United States, groups that manage endowments in the United States, we manage more than anybody else, because we manage, our endowment is about 45 billion, and Harvard's endowment is slightly bigger than that, but we manage a bunch of other money that Harvard doesn't manage. So this is the first publicly created endowment, and we've already passed everybody in terms of size.
Very nice.
Yeah, we have this incredible purpose, and this is the most important thing, really, if you're going to go to work for anybody. Like, what is the purpose of what you're doing? And can you get people into that purpose who are energized by it, and get them into seats where their personal genius comes out and they work together? So just imagine this purpose. We eradicate poverty through allowing underprivileged, under-resourced, underrepresented people to go to college. Going to college makes a $1 million difference, in the lifetime of the typical earner. And money is far from the most important thing, but it allows them to get into a different place and have a different lifestyle.
Right.
We and others, for instance, with these two systems, if you look at underrepresented students, we have more underrepresented students in our system than every Ivy League school combined times 10. So you're talking about serving those who have skills and just need somebody to give them a leg up to get started. A&M and the University of Texas are top of the heap. And we also fund research that, believe it or not, creates one new company every 6 days. For our state, one new company basically a week. And when we go cross over to MD Anderson and Southwest Medical and places like that, these guys do $750 million a year in medical research. They do 2,000 clinical trials. to give away for free $170 million a year in free medical services. So we eradicate poverty through education. We fund a new company every week, and we have the privilege of helping to help support people who are finding the cure and caring for people with cancer. It's a pretty good reason to come to work every day. I do want to talk to you about the state of the world.
Okay.
But we're going to do it in the car. State of the world?
Yeah, let's talk about where things are now.
There are many things that are really impressive about the generation that's coming up now.
Yeah.
But there's at least one flaw that you're going to have to get over at some point. You don't really value the past.
Mm.
Okay? And you don't think there's anything to learn from the past.
Right.
And I thought that too. But you're very, very good at seeing the future. And that's also very important. So let's just say you should be, 60% seeing the future, 40% understanding the past. Y'all are more like 90-10. And it's understandable. I mean, there's so much technology coming in. I have a meeting every Monday morning, just one-on-one with the head of Google's quantum computing and artificial intelligence, just so we can exchange views. So I'm pretty up to date with what the technology is now and what's going to be in the future.
Sure.
But if you don't understand cycles, if you don't understand people, you don't understand that no matter how much we progress, greed and fear don't change. And whatever the new technology is, just new. It's the things that came earlier were just as disruptive as the things that we're seeing now to the people then. But here's a situation the U.S. was in. Since 1980, every expansion, we have an economic downturn. Then we have the recovery, which takes you back to where you were before the economic downturn occurred, and then you expand from there. And that completes the cycle. And so every expansion that we've had since 1980 has been about 80 basis points or 0.8% below the previous expansion.
Right.
So if you take a look at our last expansion was about 2.3%, which means that if that trend continued, we were headed towards 1.5% real GDP growth. And that's Japan levels. And Japan, because it got to that level, has been there for 30 years. So we knew going in that we could not allow that to happen.
Right. That
was before the pandemic. And then so we're in that situation. This is why the interest rates are as low as they are. It's why you're having the stimulation that you've been having to ward that off. But when the pandemic hit, that was an $11 trillion hole. Because for the first time in the history of humankind, we heard these words all over the world. Stop everything now. Stop everything now. This had never been said in the history of the world. And when you stop everything now in the United States, for the period of time that they were thinking, somebody has to come in and figure out, how much that's going to cost. And you have to figure out what you're looking at. And so at first we thought we were looking at a pandemic in the way we looked at it in the past, and it was just going to be a short-term deal. Then that turned out not to be true. The second theory that the markets had were, it turned out we had a 34% decline in the stock market in about 3 weeks. Fastest decline in our history. And so we looked for precedent. So the only two precedents we had for that were 1987, which was an event. I was there. The market went 22% in one day. 22%. And the other one was the Depression. So which one was it going to be? Was this going to be a kind of one short period of thing, or was it we were going into a depression? And then all of a sudden we realized that, we have our dashboards and we look out to let's say the far right, and there's this thing that's going up and up. And it's the amount of stimulus that we're putting in the system relative to the size of our economy. And we realized that what the situation is we're approaching this as if it was a war. So a war is anything that threatens your viability and your sovereignty. Anything that threatens your viability or your sovereignty as a nation. And so, for instance, when the Japanese invaded Pearl Harbor, just out of the blue, something we weren't expecting, just like this pandemic, it's the same thing. But this time, the enemy was not a human; it was a virus. And when these things happen, what the strategy is, do whatever it takes for as long as it takes, no matter the cost. We'll deal with any fallout issues later. Because if you don't make it through, if you don't survive, if you don't sustain, if you don't keep your sovereignty, nothing matters. And so the price for stopping everything now in the United States was about $11 trillion. $11 trillion. Our economy is about $22 trillion. So when things happen, when you go to war, for instance, if you're we've gone to war overseas. We've sent our soldiers. We've stayed back here and geared up our economy and prayed for them and sent them things to so on. But to go to war, you have to have money. You got to have the stuff that's going to win. So the monetary policy starts churning out money. The Treasury starts churning out money. The money was to buy tanks and planes and supplies and troops, munitions. So that then our soldiers got these planes and they flew off to another country and they fought the war with what we could buy them from the money that we created or took out of the bank. So now the pandemic comes. This is a totally different thing. It's not a war overseas. It's not a war against a human. It's a war right here at home. It's a war against a virus. And so in the same way, we still have to raise the money to defeat the virus. And what we, in order to do that, we had to stop the economy. This is all part of a strategy to win a war. We had to stop the economy. But when we stopped the economy, we didn't need more planes or we didn't need more arms or we didn't need more soldiers. What we needed to do was to get money to the people who were in the war, in the strategy, to sustain them while they execute the strategy, which was what? Hide in their homes, distract, stay away from the enemy, hide in their homes, distract, stay alive long enough that our scientists back in another place could work feverishly to try to go up with that vaccine.
Right.
So every single person in the United States feels like they've been in a war, and they have been. It wasn't a war overseas. It wasn't a war against a human. It was a war right here. Everybody felt like it was right at their doorstep. And everybody has executed their part of the war, and it looks like we're about to win it.
Yeah, it does. Well, but it's obviously, as you said, at enormous cost. Our listeners will definitely want to hear your thoughts on GameStop, Bitcoin, NFTs. What are your thoughts on how these stories this year will matter in 5 to 10 years and beyond that?
Well, the story of GameStop is the story of the democratization of the stock market. It's also probably a story of a little bit of illegal activity. But it has awakened the traditional institutional investor. When you're, for instance, if I'm correct, GameStop actually had something like 9 CEOs in 12 months. It's not a company that's been running extremely well. It was heavily shorted by the institutional community, and when you have a massive amount of flow into or out of a stock, it moves the stock a lot. So if you're really short the stock, and all of a sudden there's a simultaneous cascade of money that comes in, you're what's called squeezing these shorts. These people who are planning on the stock market going down,
Right.
And if you're long a stock, if you bought a stock, you can lose. If you bought it at 100, it can go to 0. You can lose 100%. But bought a stock at 10 and you shorted it and it goes to 1,000, you lost a lot more than just your $100.
Right.
And so that's what happens. So with Bitcoin, I've actually had to study this pretty carefully. And I want to mention that on April 16th and 17th, perhaps the best Bitcoin conference, honestly, that's been created so far in this country is going to happen at Texas A&M.
Looking forward to it.
Yes, it's so it's a 2-day conference from from the morning of April 16th through the afternoon of Saturday the 17th. The whole thing can be done virtually. It's just now coming out. It's already, I think 500 people have already signed up, and we just started advertising. So this is going to be, probably thousands and thousands of people. All of the could come in person on Saturday, but if that filled up in seemingly the first day, but we'll have some of the most iconic people in the country to speak that day. There's a guy named Michael Saylor. He put his entire balance sheet into Bitcoin. Ray Dalio, who's the CEO of Bridgewater, and I will discuss Bitcoin together. Ray's a very dear friend. We'll have the head of the Dallas Fed and a guy named Tim Draper, who's probably the most entrepreneurial man I've ever met. Then we're going to have Pete Brigger, who is the founder of Fortress, which is one of the largest hedge funds in the world. We're going to have Wences, who is called Patient Zero. Patient Zero means he was the first person in Menlo Park to recognize the value of Bitcoin back in 2009 and proselytized it in there, to people like Bill Gates and others. So he's the guy who really got things started. We have Bill Miller, who you wouldn't know, but Bill Miller is the most successful money manager living. We have all kinds of respect for Warren Buffett that people hear about. Bill Miller has probably outperformed by 2 times for a very long time. And we have Michael Daffy, who just resigned as the head of all of international for Goldman Sachs. Then we have a guy named Albert Guier, and he is coming from venture capital called USB, and they're the biggest holders of Bitcoin. Not Bitcoin, Coinbase, which is about to go public, and known to be an expert in that area. And then we have Glenn Hutchins, who was the founder of a company called Silver Lake, and he was an advisor to President Clinton. And that's just guys like me. Then the next day, we have younger people coming on who are actively involved in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is very easily understood. It seems complicated because you have to translate Bitcoin into English. But it's a system that I will explain it because in the beginning, because I can do the translation. And we're going to give both sides. We're also bringing in someone who is against Bitcoin. So anybody who gets to be, so I would highly encourage. This is something people should know about because it might be something. And it's not going to necessarily, it's not 100%, but the chances are probably 50, 70% that this will emerge to be something that'll be significant. And this is going to be the fastest, best way to learn.
Agreed. I will definitely be there.
You can sign up. Tell them where to sign up,
We'll post a link in the show notes for the listeners. So go to that where you're getting your content, whether it's on YouTube or on the podcast, and we will have a link for you to sign up. If you had to give one piece of advice, only one piece of advice to young people, potential Maze candidates, Maze graduates listening to this show, what would you tell them?
The one thing that comes to mind is you have to become what I'll call your true self. You have to become your true self. You have to know who you are. You have to settle your values. You need to understand what you think is important. You need to nail down what your worldview is going to be. You need to become your true self. A guy named Thomas Merton, who's a canonized Catholic saint.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Thomas Merton.
Yeah. So these kind of Catholic saints are called mystics, and they're actually geniuses, and they're both geniuses, and they're very holy people. And so I was, for a while, I was wondering, can a person in business make any kind of difference in the world spiritually? And so all of a sudden I read Thomas Merton, and Thomas Merton says, to become a saint means to become your true self. And that was really bad news, because I knew I could become my true self. I didn't think I could become Mother Teresa, who I've been with, by the way, one time. And trust me, she is very scary. She is such a holy woman, and when you were with her, she was not your grandmother, although she was very loving. But if you were not doing your job, she would be the first person to let you know. You can imagine why. When you become your true self, what that means is you go and find your own Calcutta. There was actually a man who got convicted about this and sold a pretty prosperous business, and he went to Calcutta because that's all he knew about service. And to his credit, he did what he knew. He was there for about two or 3 weeks, I guess. And Mother Teresa apparently was watching him, and she came over, taps him on the shoulder, and she said, "Sir, what are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I've sold everything. I've come here to serve the poorest of the poor with you." She said, "I have an observation. Would you allow me to share it with you?" I said, "Of course, Mother Teresa." "Well, here it is. You're terrible at this. Go home and find your own Calcutta." So if you don't know where your Calcutta is, if you don't know where your Calcutta is, it's where you're going next. It's where you are right now. It's but eventually, and that may be where your Calcutta is. But you, in order to serve in your my Calcutta happens to be in business at a particular level. It turns out there's not one Calcutta that's better than another. It's just kind of my assignment. You have your assignment. Everybody has their assignment.
Right.
And if you stay with your true self, you'll go to that assignment and you'll fulfill it faithfully and well. But if you don't, because if there's a true self, there's a what?
False self.
Correct. There's a false self. And everything in life will try to draw you away from your true self to your false self. And when you do that, you give up every advantage you have in your life. So find your true self would be my one piece of example of advice.
Beautiful. Let's move to some rapid fire. What do you consider, very quickly, what do you consider your most valuable failure?
I lost $10,000 on a stock called Damson when I was 23. It was all the money that Julie and I had. And I lost 100% of it, which is all the money we had other than our just regular income. And it was valuable because instead of blaming it on somebody else or just chalking it up to bad luck, I tried to think about, now, what in the world happened here? How could this happen? Because my wife was sitting there saying, you did major in finance, correct? And what I realized was I deserved to lose the whole thing. You know why?
Why?
Because I didn't do the work. I did not do the work that was required. In order to be successful, don't rely on luck. Don't rely on somebody else's, sentence or two, or what they're saying is great or not great. You succeed by doing the work yourself. So I learned that lesson right there when I had nothing. And now I've managed over $500 billion, in the course of my life, and for, millions and millions of people, for central banks, for governments, for companies all over the world. And I've lost a fair amount of money, since then, but I've made a lot of money too for people. And you know what? Either way, I always do the work, and everybody that works with me does the work. And that was my most valuable failure.
All right. What is your fondest memory of TAMU?
Intramurals was I remember basking in the glow with pizza at 11 o'clock every night, watching Columbo.
Oh, I love Columbo.
Yeah, with all the guys. Remember that 11 o'clock at night was that was the only time you could call your girlfriend at a decent hour. Everybody raced for the phone, and if you did not get through to your girlfriend at 11 o'clock precisely, and you had to call her back at 12 o'clock, you were in trouble, because it meant every boyfriend in the entire world had beaten you and cared more about their girlfriend than you did. what I remember most of the relationships that we created. And these guys we're all still close today. And I realized that later on in life, it's more important who you play dominoes with every Thursday night at the Dixie Chicken than whether or not your grade in accounting was, 91.
Right.
Just imagine, you're 40, which I know seems like eternity from where you are now, and you're sitting somewhere and you get a phone call from somebody, and the person says, "Hey, Ben, I was a top accounting student in our whole entire school. Do you remember me?" Well, one is you might just say, "No, I was never aware of you." Or number two is, "Yeah, I remember you, curve buster." Maybe not quite as fondly as you think.
Right.
And they say, "Well, look, I've got a deal here and I want to look at it. I don't know why I just thought of you, are you interested?" Kind of like, well, you know what? I really appreciate the phone call. I got a lot going on and just don't have a lot of time right now. Thank you for calling, and maybe just keep me in mind for later. Lo and behold, you hang up, they get another phone call immediately. Says, "Ben, do you remember me? We played dominoes every Thursday night at the Dixie Chicken. Do you remember that time that those people put down those double sixes and we lost the tournament?" And it was so fun, when we won 2 or 3. And man, those are great times. Do you remember me? What are you gonna say?
Of course.
Absolutely, I remember you. And he says, "I've been thinking, I got a deal here, and I just thought of you, and I wondered if you'd be interested in taking a look at it." What are you gonna say?
Tell me more.
You're not so busy anymore. This is somebody that you have experiences with that you enjoy. I said, "Absolutely. Tell me what's up." And you go from there. In the end, it's your relationship capability that matters the most. Unless you're going to be the big scientist, but even then, you got to be able to communicate. You got to get the word out. People have got to like to work with you.
Well, I guess I have to stop being such a jerk all the time then.
Yeah, that takes time. That's usually your 20s.
We end each session with some good bull. Anyone you'd like to send some good bull?
Well, sure. I'd like to send some good bull to Jack McAdoo, to Wes Chambers, Stuart Davis, Steve Levaskis, to Dennis Brown. I'd like to send some good bull to Don Frazier, who I was a research assistant my senior year and still at A&M. And I apologize for being such a research assistant. Now, all these years later, such a terrible one. But thanks for having confidence in me. And I just really like to send some good bit out to all the people that are in my family who were such an encouragement to me and got me to A&M in the first place.
Beautiful. Britt, thanks so much for your time. I know you got to scoot, but we really appreciate you, and thanks, and gig 'em.
Gig 'em to you. I forgot to mention every Titan that's out there, all 800 of you.
We'll have you back on to talk a little bit more about Titans of Investing.
Yeah, I'll hold you to it.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Ben. I really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it as well. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed the fascinating discussion with Britt. For our MasterCast top 3 takeaways, I first wanted to talk about the Bitcoin conference coming up. I am so excited. Ben is going to be the fabulous MC for the conference. He's hosting it, which is so exciting to have you involved in that way with something that is so big for Maze right now.
Yeah. I'm really honored to be involved. I appreciated being asked, and I'm looking forward to will no doubt be an incredible event.
Yeah, I agree. Ryan and I are going to participate in as much of it as we can. I think it's going to be a really interesting event and so much to learn about investing in Bitcoin and all the things that it can do for public good as well. You can register for the conference at tx.ag/Bitcoin. Again, tx.ag/Bitcoin. We hope you'll join us for the conference and the amazing lineup.
Yeah, our guest and friend of the show, Travis Kling, will also be there and will be speaking, I believe, a couple of times.
Yeah, I saw him on the agenda. I was really excited. If you haven't listened to his episode, you might go back and listen to that as well. He was on MasterCast with a fascinating episode both the YouTube video and the podcast as well. For our second takeaway, I wanted to hear what investment advice from Britt you found particularly helpful. If there was anything that he said that really stuck out to you as an investor, what you might have taken away from that.
Well, one thing that I thought, I think the thing that kind of resonated the most for me in what he was saying was just sort of the breadth of understanding that he has for what's going on in the market, and just being able to kind of draw from here and draw from there. And all of that kind of forms this whole. That is definitely how we have tried to approach investing as well. And sometimes I feel like we've done a pretty good job of it, and other times I feel like we haven't necessarily done as good a job of it. There are important things that we've missed. But one of the nice things about investing, or really of being in any business, is you get to learn from your mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes have been expensive, but experience is your friend in the investing world. And it's just obvious how much attention he's paying to so many different things, and how many things he's keeping his eye on at once. It was really impressive.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that was really neat. And the kind of comprehensive global view of investing that he has. Before we started recording, he said he read 11 newspapers a day, or seven newspapers a day, something like that. So
yeah,
that's a lot. I mean, he's definitely keeping his pulse on what's going on in the world.
No question.
For our last takeaway, I really appreciated what he said about being true to yourself, and how it's so important to avoid things that pull us to our false selves. And I think that's such a good lesson, whether it's with investing or just personal life, right? Be true to ourselves, be ourselves, invest in our energy in things that are true to ourselves, invest our money in things that are true to ourselves. I thought that was a really good takeaway and lesson from Britt.
Yeah. And I think some of it, like, I had a hard time when I was a younger man, I guess, coming to understand what it was that was really important to me. I think some people have a pretty inherent understanding of who they are and what they want. And there was a time when I didn't really even know what that meant. And maybe that sounds silly, but it was a real challenge figuring out, all right, what is it that I actually want? And maybe even more important, what are the things that do not matter to me? Because I remember as a student thinking, that kind of everything was important in some way, and that I just sort of wanted what was typical to want. I wanted that kind of life. But quickly figured out that the process of just graduate from school, go to job fairs, go get a job, go from there, that process was not interesting to me. And I worked in a couple of industries before I came to where I am now, and that was the right thing for me. And even though neither one of those industries turned out to be quite the right fit, that time was really important.
Mm-hmm. I think that probably it's very normal to not be able to narrow the focus as much when we're younger, right? I mean, we have to learn what's important to us. We have to go through those experiences. Like you talked about with investing, we have to make some mistakes that might be a little bit costly and learn what is important to us to do and what is important to us not to do, and kind of go through that process. So I think you've done that probably earlier than most, but it's an interesting aspect of life.
It's funny you say that, because there have been many times where I've felt like, sort of coming to my current career, there are times where I felt like I was a little bit behind the curve because of all these other things that I've done, and I wouldn't give those experiences back. But there was definitely a little bit of feeling like joining the MBA program, for example. I think at the time the cohort started, I think I was the third oldest member of my class of what started out as 74, 75 people.
Luckily, you look younger than all of them, so it worked out for you.
Well, that's
no one knows how old
I'm
you
not
are.
sure if it's true, but that's kind of you to say. Regardless, either way, there were moments where, not often, but every now and then, I would think, am I too old to be doing this? Am I too old to be here? And one of the great things that I think about this institution, whether we're talking about Mays or Texas A&M in general, is that you don't get that kind of snobbery from people. There were classmates who were older than me, and I remember thinking, everyone's welcome here. Do the work, be capable, do the right thing, uphold the values, and you can thrive here. And that's one of the things I love most about this institution. That really matters to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you said about like sometimes you wonder, I mean, you've definitely have gone a lot of different paths. And had you stayed on one, you might have been able to specialize in one thing, but you wouldn't have found the thing that would have made you most happy. You wouldn't have learned all the things that you learned along the way. Sometimes I wish my path had been more winding, that I had taken more risks. Or I always say, if I had kids, and I don't, so I can say whatever the heck I want after the end of this sentence and whatever. But I always say if I had kids, I would love to give them X amount of dollars after high school to just go figure some stuff out. Like, you're not allowed to go to college for 2 years now. And I realize there are some horrible things about that idea that make it complicated. But really, I just would really admire people who take some chances to figure some things out and to go on that windier path. I think it has a lot of value.
Yeah. And our parents encouraged us to consider doing it. And honestly, if I hadn't gotten an athletic scholarship, I probably would have taken a year off. And my sister did take a year off. My brother did too, now that I think about it. It wasn't right away. He enrolled for a semester, transferred back, took a year off, and then finished at A&M. So I guess I was the only one who didn't make use of that.
Oh, yeah. No, my parents were very clear that was not an option. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I still agree with it as kind of an inspiration, though.
Yeah. It's interesting. All right. Well, you want to close this with a quote today?
I would love to close us with a quote. And actually, I'm going to quote Britt right back to himself, because I wrote down something that he said last week when we were on our pre-call. And he said, we were talking about the many successful people that he has been associated with. And he said, they all have one thing in common. Do you want to know what it is? And that's something that he likes doing. He likes like giving you the question and then making you guess a couple of times before he tells you the answer. But I guessed a couple of things and he said, nope. All successful people are prolific readers. Britt Harris.
Hope you enjoyed the episode.
Hope you enjoyed it.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.
Looking to start a podcast? Trying to tackle questions like, how do I record? How do I edit? How can I get music for my show? What equipment do I need? How do I distribute it? Good news. The podcast architects are here to help. Whether that's from start to finish, fixing the audio quality, helping you get the episodes posted, go to podconsulting.co. Everyone has something worth sharing with the world.